A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, a special edition.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 36. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host, John Llewellyn. Hello, John.
Hello.
You ready to talk about Star Wars and all that ephemera?
Star Wars.
I'm sure that
is the name I haven't heard in a long time.
In a long time. Hey, creepy old guy. Yeah, everybody talks about...
He's me.
Of course I know him. He's me. We were part of the Lavender Hill mob.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about how weird it is Marty McFly hangs out with Doc Brown, but...
Yeah.
What's he hanging out with some old Jedi? Of course, I guess
we're learning more about that now in the Korean comic and the Kenobi journals.
Exactly. The Journals of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Speaking of that,
at least, yeah, I was gonna make a Journal of the Whills joke, and then I was like, oh, thank God they are not turning those into comic books.
Oh, they're supposedly, well, they mentioned the Journal of the Whills, and for people who aren't steeped in Star Wars lore, the Journal of the Whills was a creation by George Lucas, and it was kind of a framing device, and that was an early framing device for the original Star Wars movie that was dropped early in the script production, but it actually survived into Alan Dean Foster's novelization of A New Hope, or just Star Wars, and it was resurrected for the novelization of The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
But I forget what the quote is. I actually, like I said, I haven't really dipped into that novelization. For some reason, there's something about that movie that's such a visual thing that somehow reading it just doesn't.
Yeah, and I saw early, not even reviews, but just people on Twitter talking about how awkward the writing was. Like, just the sentences were. I
would agree, and I mentioned this before that I picked up the Audible edition on audio, and the guy the reader, Mark Thompson, I think his name is, who there's two guys that do a lot of the Star Wars, and no offense to them, I'm not a huge fan of some of their characterizations. Like some of the Han Solo is pretty good, but whoever did this one, they do Poe Dameron like really, really bro-ish.
Oh, well, I want to talk about a related issue later, but we'll get to it.
But anyway, just to close up the whole Journal of the Whills thing, I will say this. I was reading this, and I think it was in the Kaminsky's Secret History of Star Wars, is that for a long time, George Lucas wanted to basically have this framing a device of the Journal of the Whills, almost like, we opened up the big book. It's been...
let's also note, Whills here is Whills, Whills.
Yes. And initially it was going to be kind of one of those situations where I guess it was a bunch of Wookiees sitting around a book, and they open it up, and this is the story that they're reading, which kind of...
It's their annual Life Day tradition.
Exactly. And the funny thing is that in the great history of George Lucas, or really Star Wars as a franchise, never truly throwing out any ideas. Yes, these ideas were recycled in the holiday special in theme, but there has really never been a real big explanation about who the Whills are. I mean, it's a framing device. I mean, some of the Planet of the Apes used this kind of thing as like, oh, the lawgiver, and who else used? I mean, Frank Herbert.
Yeah, definitely Frank Herbert
used a lot. Princess Irulan's.
I mean, that's honestly probably where George Lucas got the idea.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, one thing, it's like as soon as you hear someone say it, you go, oh, of course. But it's not something that you think of a lot when you think of Star Wars for whatever reason. I guess just because Star Wars became such a huge phenomenon on its own. But, that Chris Taylor book about how Star Wars conquered the galaxy. I mean, he does talk about, like, yeah, George Lucas read Dune and then just, like, took a lot of Dune and tried to cram it into his existing idea. And you're like, oh, of course he did. Right? Like, of course Dune, like, he basically tried to just, like, strip Dune for parts for the original Star Wars movie. But again, it's, like, not something, it's, like, something that's maybe at the back of your mind. And you sort of know, but you don't ever actually think about. But then when you hear, you're like, oh, yeah, of course he did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that had come up in Dave Pollock's Skywalking biography because there had been... now, this has been refuted in some cases that Lucas had actually thought about suing Universal for Battlestar Galactica. And in Pollock's book, he claims that maybe Universal was going to help Frank Herbert file a countersuit against Lucas for what he pilfered, kind of like a, what do they call it, a standoff, kind of like a John Woo style standoff where everybody's pointing lawsuits at each other, and it all dropped. I think that's not true. I think it actually had more to do with Lucas tried to sue John Dykstra for using techniques he developed. Flex. Yeah, techniques he developed for Star Wars for other properties. But if you're ever interested, yeah, do some searching on the Journal of the Whills. It's not really going to add anything to your understanding of Star Wars, except for just that, Lucas, his whole thing isn't so much that he invented all these things, it's that he was very good at synthesizing what was out there. I mean, Dune was a big deal in the late 60s in science fiction, at least. At least that's what I've come to understand. I mean, it's influenced a lot of people. But
yeah, well, the only reason that the Journal of the Whills, again, the Journal of the Whills, at least for me, is something that, like, I know in the back of my head is part of Star Wars, but I just never think about it. But there's another podcast. It's not Star Wars, but it's called I Don't Even Own a Television.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically just these two guys reading terrible books and talking about them. I should admit that I've never heard of the podcast, but I follow one of the guys who does it on Twitter. And last week on Twitter, he posted, like, his text was just like, "What the hell is this even?" Or something along those lines. And it was I guess he took a picture of his Kindle or something, and it was an excerpt from the Journal of the Whills. And I was like, "Oh, buddy, if you, I don't think you realize what you're in for with that."
Wait, so is he reading the novelization of Star Wars, or is
he must be? Yeah, either I don't know if it's The Force Awakens or if it's one of the other, because I feel like there must be one or two EU books that, like, starts off with a quotation from the Journal of the Whills or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
My guess is that it would be The Force Awakens, but I don't. Like I said, I've actually never heard the podcast, so I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Lucas kind of dropped that idea, and that's why it made a reappearance after he left. It's kind of like,
yeah,
he probably thought, no, but I don't know. It's hard to know what, It's kind of funny how, stuff starts coming out about Lucas, not necessarily negative stuff, but more like his own personal fatigue at having this huge thing that, is primarily was his construct, but over the years, because of authors and TV shows and toys and role-playing games, it ballooned outside of his own realm. But I do remember in the last few years of his owning of Star Wars is that he got pretty loose about matters of canon.
Right.
Like the fact that Mahdi, the guy who in A New Hope is strangled psychically by Darth Vader, he didn't have a name, and he was on Conan O'Brien, and then he goes, "Oh, his name is Conando something Mahdi," and they had to go change it.
And then he named the planet Stu John or something like that when he was on the Daily Show.
And then, like, later on, they were coming up with ideas for or developing a video game, and it was like they needed a name for a Sith Lord, and like, and he suggested like Darth Stinky or something like that.
Yeah,
and so it kind of shows this fatigue. It is, although, and this is probably one of our more. I'm chomping at the bit today, even though I'm kind of sick.
Well, we took a week off. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah. Well, I also had this idea last night, and maybe this might be a goofy thought in the daylight, but last night I thought it was kind of funny that I'd like to make a gentleman's bet with our listener, gentle person's bet. I'm sorry about that.
Sure.
A gentle person's bet about the future of George Lucas. And so gentle person's bet, no money involved, but how much do you want to bet in sometime in the next 10 years he tries to pitch some kind of new saga unrelated to Star Wars that he's going to try to like, oh, I'm going to get back to the old serials and stuff, the things that
I don't know. I think if he did, it would be purely as a producer. But even then, like, I don't know that he would be able to be hands off with it. Like, it's tricky.
But yeah, but it's like,
just because, I mean, I don't know that he has like the energy or the desire to be like involved day to day with that kind of stuff. Like, I think he wants to just like you said, I could see that idea of like, oh, I want to bring back like the old serials kind of thing. I could see that, oh, let's make a Red Tails TV show or something. Whatever.
Right, but I kind of mean it in the sense that almost kind of like what Stan Lee has done, that he's not a creative. He puts his name on stuff, and he kind of just looks at it, and he's like, it's like it'll be a situation where like, George Lucas presents, Warrior Future, and it's because, Stan Lee had his whole thing like Stan Lee's superheroes. And he tried, and he spent like, he got a ton of money to pitch these superheroes that were going to be like, kind of, oh, you're going to need Marvel, you're not going to need DC. We went straight to the source. I mean, maybe I'm overestimating, Lucas's interest in being in Hollywood and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And also, you never know what kind of stipulations these deals have. Like, you can do it, but you can never create anything that would be a direct competition to what you created before. It was just a passing thought that this idea of like George Lucas, like, I've got all these, he hires some guy to draw pictures, and he tries to, goes, well, I don't own Star Wars anymore, but I can create something from whole cloth.
Yeah. And
then, my other theory was it would probably go terribly, much like this is way off topic, much like when Metallica's guitar player, he started his own guitar pedal company recently, and his whole like part of that, what do they call it, the sizzle reel or whatever, when you send it out to media outlets, he said something to the effect of, this is the first, it's like, I'm proud to be part of an organization that makes guitar pedals that actually has a guitar player working for it. When it's like, that's ridiculous. Right. It's like most of the people that make guitar pedals are guitar players. It was, I think, what he wanted to say, but didn't want to sound impolitic, is this is the first time a rich rock star is involved in it.
A guitarist that you've heard of.
Exactly. A guitarist who's in his 50s with a spiral perm has ever made his own guitar power. Anyway, though, we have tons of actual Star Wars stuff to talk about.
And so there's news even just today before we started. Where,
so I guess
we found out episode 7 is going to hit iTunes in less than a month.
Yeah, it's going to be the 15th, supposedly, of March. And it's
Anno Domini 2016.
That makes sense. I mean, they've already kind of, Amazon had the pre-order for April fifth up, and then they pulled it. And then it was like, well, what's the talk? And one of the things I haven't been able to, normally I just pre-order it and forget about it, and it would show up when it shows up. But I kind of want to get the 3D disc, and the 3D disc has not been advertised as being an option. There's been some talk whether it's going to be a 2-disc set or a 3-disc set. Like maybe the 2-disc set would have the DVD and the movie, and then the 3-disc set would have the DVDs, the extras, and the movie and a digital copy. I mean, Disney tend to do the way they package these things. If I'm thinking about like some of their other big movies, is they have a separate one for 3D and they have a separate one for 2D. And since they just repackaged the original Lucas Star Wars, that they probably aren't going to repackage it yet. They're probably going to hold out for a few more movies before who knows. But like I have like John Carter, which is in the Tron Legacy in the 3D versions. But I haven't heard anything about it actually coming out on 3D. That's the one thing that's kind of like, I mean, I have a 3D television. I don't.
I was going to ask, do you have like glasses for that, or what? How does that work?
Yeah, it's
with a home theater system.
Well, it's it's not a super high end television, so it uses there's two types of 3D for home viewing. There's passive and active, and passive you can really use the same glasses when you go to let's say real 3D on the side of them. You can just use those at home. It's not the IMAX 3D ones won't work, but they're not very expensive. But it uses some kind of technology to. I don't really understand. It's one of those Vizio TVs, which are the discount TVs, but it uses some kind of thing where it cuts the resolution a little bit and then presents image, and it looks really good. I mean, some people, don't have a lot of experience with 3D televisions, but a friend of ours was over and he said that he thought my TV looked better than as a passive one, where the Samsung has an LG. They have these things. The glasses have a little battery in it, and it creates this kind of flickering effect that's in sync with the TV, and that's how it's achieved when they call it active 3D. But it doesn't matter on disc. I mean, that's just the way it's presented. And I don't know how projectors work with 3D. I don't know if it's the same kind of thing. But I wasn't a huge fan of seeing The Force Awakens in 3D. But if it's available, I'm going to want to have it at least just for. Because, just to see it, or sometimes stuff on 3D actually looks better at home than it did on the screen. If you're not sitting in a good seat, if you're, if you got a glass that was, one of your 3D glasses, the lens was warped and it didn't quite work. So I did pre-order the digital copy. Just so it's like, because it always comes out 3 weeks before disc anyway. That's the new push with retailers. They want people to abandon their physical media. I happen to like physical media, but Star Wars is one of those rare occasions where I will spend a little bit more to get what I want a little bit earlier. I mean, it's, for $20, that's cheaper than me getting in the car with the wife and going one more time to the theater, I wasn't going to do that because I'm kind of like, it's already starting to leave. It's already left the Cinerama here in town. And,
I mean, the other people is like, I hear people talk about on other podcasts or think, the 17th time in the theater, like this is my 17th time seeing the movie. And I'm like, I don't think I could see a movie that many times in this short of a span. Yeah,
without end up hating it. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, as much as I really enjoyed The Force Awakens, and I'm not really. I mean, maybe when the home video comes out and we're able to watch it or whatever, maybe we can do an episode where we're a bit more critical, or we talk about what we don't like. But generally, I like it. But I will say this, being honest. You get to a certain age, it's when you watch it, when you're a kid, you watch a movie and it's just like, it goes by so fast and you're just so excited. You could watch it 10 times before you really start to process it. But by the time, when you're older and it's like, it's not as magical as it used to be. And it's like by the time you're watching the movie the 4th time, you're kind of starting to go, oh, that doesn't really work anymore. Or, I remember how much I hate this line, the way this line is reading. So, my hat's off to people that go and they watch a movie 10, 15 times and they still love it as much. I'm just not one of those kind of people. I think I would start getting fidgety. I mean, I did famously, well, not famously, but famously in show lore, for people who listen, know that I think I saw The Phantom Menace in the theater like 6 times.
Yeah.
But by that 6th time, I was kind of like, oh boy, I'm really kind of just waiting for the pod race here, because that's the best part in this, with the sound and all that stuff. Because I was seeing it in high-end theaters. I wasn't going out to, like, when they did the special editions. I did my long-suffering wife. Well, actually, we weren't even married at the time, so it's a shock that she actually married me after making her do this. We would go all the way out into the county to, like, dollar theaters to go, let's go see Star Wars one more time when it's in the theaters. And it's like, okay. Yeah. Now I think it's like, it would be pretty hard for me to, when they did that marathon of all 6 movies and the Force Awakens, I didn't even consider it for a second. Yeah, no. And I've heard reports basically from other podcasts or people that had gone and just talking about the fatigue that they'd felt by the time. It's like this kind of thing, like, I was really excited and I was really tired. And I'm just like, oh, that's like the worst feeling ever. Yeah. But yeah, and I mean, I really like The Force Awakens. I guess I'll buy it on DVD. I guess. I get the feeling you're not as much of a home video guy. So I used to have a ton of DVDs, and then a couple of years ago, I was moving, and I had just moved the year before or something, and I was like, all right, I'm sick of moving all this stuff. So I pared my DVD collection way, way, way back. I'm starting to grow it again, which I am not crazy about. I need to find a way to pare it back some more. It's mostly just the way my living situation has been, being in grad school the last 6 years or so. I've been living in apartments, and for the last 7 or so years. And before that, I lived for a couple of years. I had one bedroom in a house that I shared with like 4 other people. So I haven't had a ton of space for that kind of stuff for a while. And so I think more than anything, it's just been a product of my living situations. But it does sort of require me to think about, like, all right, how many times am I going to watch this thing if I buy it, versus, waiting and just like, all right, well, if I think I'm only going to watch it once or twice for the next couple of years, then maybe I'll just rent it on Amazon or whatever, the once or twice that I'll actually watch it. Whereas, okay, if I think I'll watch this, once a year or more, then yeah, maybe it's worth buying. So, I liked it, and it feels weird though to say, like, oh, I'm not going to buy it, because it's not like the prequels where, like, no, there's a reason I didn't buy them. It's because I don't like them. It's like, yeah, I still like this movie. If I like this movie well enough, why not buy it? But it'll just depend on how I'm feeling and what I probably, at the very least, I'll probably wait to buy it, because I'll wait until the price goes down. Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I mean, that's the thing. It's kind of a blessing and a curse to have, buy a physical media. Because if I think about, like, if I'm sitting in this office and I'm sitting amongst my movies, and it's like, I've pared down a lot, because when I first moved into this house, it was like, I had a picture and it was like wall to wall, because I worked at a store that we sold stuff used. So we would get an incredible discount. So it wouldn't be much of a hit for me to go and say, oh, have I seen Monk season 2? And it's like, this is before Netflix had really taken hold and stuff like that. And I go, with my discount, I could walk out with this for $12. Yeah. And I would buy it. And I would do the same thing. I would buy whole sets of, seasons of DVD of shows on DVD. Because again, this was like early 2000s, before streaming and digital, versions of TV shows and movies were actually a viable thing. And so, yeah. Yeah, and I'm coming up against this problem a little bit because now they're starting to talk about, they're starting to come out with 4K DVD, which now it comes in a combo thing where instead of it being, Blu-ray and DVD and digital copy, it's 4K Blu-ray, Blu-ray, and then digital copy. And it's like, well, should I be future-proofing my collection? Because it's like, part of me still likes to go buy movies, and sometimes I'll just go out and I'll buy a movie instead of even renting it, just for the ease of it. But then I find you get a digital copy with it, and then I find out I tend to file the DVD away or the Blu-ray away, and then I just watch the digital copy.
Yeah.
For most part, it's kind of one of those situations where it's much easier just to go on the Apple TV and and then
and I guess I wonder if that came first or second. I imagine that came second behind a trend that started, I don't know, a decade or so ago when vinyl started coming back among, sort of indie rock and sort of newer music, right? To incentivize people to buy the vinyl, they would include a download code so that you would get a digital copy of the album as well. But I imagine like a lot of people, day to day on their iPods or whatever, they would listen to the digital copy, and they might listen to the vinyl copy too, but it would be like special occasions, and for the most part their vinyl would just be sitting there taking up shelf space, and it was just to like say, oh look, I have a vinyl copy of this Iron and Wine album or something, which is like, yeah, that's nice. But I mean, I could with DVDs though, I feel like it's a slightly different story where no one's going to be like super impressed that you have a Blu-ray copy in the same way that like you could conceivably like saying, oh, I have a vinyl copy of this. Like there are some people who might go like, oh wow, that's really neat. But like you're saying, buying the physical copy, but then mostly watching the digital thing. Like I think that's just a thing that happens. And
I'm starting to.
I do wonder. I mean, I do wonder by the time we get to episode 9, or who knows what the state of home media is going to be like, years down the road, if they're still pumping out Star Wars movies every year. Like, is Star Wars going to try to be at the forefront of whatever the next wave of home video or home media, watching movies, downloading them versus buying Blu-rays or whatever comes after Blu-rays? Like, are they going to try to be at the forefront of that, or are they going to just keep pumping out the Blu-rays and the, I can't even remember the name of them, the steel books, just because there's a section of Star Wars fans that it's always going to buy those no matter what, just to say that like, oh, I have the steel books of the entire sequel trilogy. And, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I can conceive of, I mean, like you were saying, like, the there's that cachet factor of having that physical media to show people, and yeah, it's like there's always a certain cachet with young college age people or whatever. When they get their first apartment, they like should bring people over and like, yeah, I got this on vinyl, and that's impressive. But that's usually where it ends, because they're like, nobody ever sits around and listens to music anymore as a group. So it's kind of like you have to go out of your way to show people stuff. And then you end up listening to your Iron and Wine or whatever it's on Apple Music or whatever. So you never even cracked the vinyl. I mean, I have what is this, Apple Music myself, and although I have been finding that there's certain catalogs that, like, I don't think Drag City or Goner has anything on Apple Music. So it's already I've already run up against, like, I can't get the new Ty Segall on there, and I've been trying to look for it, and I'm like, where's Ty Segall? And it's like, he's also under 15 different, like, Ty Segall or the Ty Segall band, or just the Ty Segall and the blankety blanks. And yeah, I think as far as video goes, I can conceivably see that maybe not Disney, but a lot of places are going to be moving into these kind of situations where they'll find ways of getting people to pay monthly for the right to own stuff. Whereas, instead of having, spending $90, or well, it's $100 now for the first 6 Star Wars movies on iTunes, that you would go in and you would subscribe to the Disney Star Wars app, where it gives you access to, 4K versions of all 9 Star Wars movies, along with exclusive content and extras. All right, okay, I'm rambling now. I'm gonna drop a pin in this conversation. Get back into Star Wars because
we'll talk. I'm sure we'll talk about it again when they actually get released. So episode 8.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Episode 7 to episode 8. Its production has started. Even just, I think, either right before or right as we started recording, I saw someone posted on Twitter, there's a short video of construction on the set of them building part of the set in Croatia. So there are two things to talk about there. First, there are several things to talk about with episode 8, but let's start with some of the issues raised there. First, they're filming in Croatia, in Dubrovnik, at another UNESCO World Heritage Site, whereas episode 7 and I guess episode 8, they filmed at Skellig Michael, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They picked another one in Croatia to film at. And then they're also using drones to keep out other people's drones as part of the security to make sure that footage of or photos of production don't leak out. That happened with episode 7 and I think maybe even Rogue One. These aerial photos of hey, look, it's a bunch of stormtroopers standing around.
Oh yeah,
hey, look,
you're right.
We're building this set in front of all these palm trees. So I think they're trying to prevent that kind of stuff from happening with episode 8, and so they're basically using drones to patrol the skies and keep other people's drones away. So let's start there. So filming in Croatia using drones. What do you think of that happening?
Well, I'm not super familiar. I mean, I went and looked some pictures of that street in Dubrovnik that they're using. Have you ever been to Croatia?
I have not.
I have not either. Looks very. I mean, I know that there's kind of in the last 10 years or so, there's been a real push about. I guess Croatia is the former Yugoslavia, right?
Maybe.
Let's just call it Croatia, so rather I don't sound like a.
I mean, I know both Croatia and Slovenia have tried to build up their tourism in the last couple of years.
They've also.
It's come visit our. It's similar to the Mediterranean, and you have all these wonderful castles and rolling hills.
Can you still consider that Eastern Europe, though? Is that what that's considered?
Yeah, it's like Central Eastern Europe.
So,
you are correct. It was part of the former Republic of Yugoslavia. Hey. I mean, it's just, I think at least part of it borders Italy, like the north of Italy.
Okay.
So it's like Central Europe, but sort of Eastern Europe.
Well, the only reason I bring that up is that there's been there's been a real financial incentive for movies that want to.
Mm-hmm.
That need to maybe either have an old world charm, which I mean I don't even know what that means, or save some money. I one time got in a conversation at a barbecue. I think it might have been last summer. I feel sorry for the poor girl, but she was from Hungary, but she went to school here in Seattle, and then she went back to Hungary to work, and she works in the film industry as a set dresser. And it was kind of. She had said it's been very popular with in Hungary, of course. Like they filmed the last Die Hard was filmed there because it was supposed to be Russia, but they film it there and
sure.
And so this just seems kind of par for the course that a lot of I was asking endless questions about movies that were made in Hungary, so that's why I felt bad for the girl because she was like, a lot more about this than I do. I just show up at 6 a.m. and start moving pillows around. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
but
and the video, the construction, it looks like it's they're taking these stone buildings on this little street that normally hold commercial shops and things in them, and they're basically building out. They're adding these big pillars or these big fake stone
facades,
yeah, essentially. And then between those facades, they're building these kind of oval openings, what look like they might end up being doors, and it sort of looks like they'll either be some kind of residence or something, but then they're also inserting, of course, because it's Star Wars, the little electronic panel with lights and different colored lights and things. So So we'll see what that ends up being in the film.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something very quick,
it's
like when they filmed in Italy. You know, there's a lot of
right,
pickup type stuff or plates.
right.
I mean, we haven't heard any talk about anything about script. I mean, the biggest revelation from this, from the beginning of production, which was, was a teaser.
Right. They made a big production announcement. Hey, we're starting production, which even then, sorry, I know I'm interrupting you, but I just want to say, like, even then, like, Bob Iger already said, like, oh, well, we have episode 8's in production and Rogue One is in post-production and episode 9 starting pre-production and the Han Solo movie is in pre-production. And then like a week later, they're like, oh, by the way, episode 8 is started production. We're like, yeah, I thought Bob Iger just said that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
they wanted to make a bigger splash with it.
I honestly think that the Skellig Michael stuff was actually filmed before the Force Awakens even came out.
Yeah, I think so too. Because they talked about doing reshoots there at one point, but I'm pretty sure that was the episode 8 people.
Right. Yeah,
like whatever they needed to do to wrap up that set
because this UNESCO thing is like they were really concerned, and I think some of the Irish government or the people were a little concerned about having a big film crew out there. You know what I mean? It's kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time because the tourism's going to go through the roof for that place, but it's a very fragile area, and there are a lot of rules when you're up there, and it's definitely, that's important. I know that they've already there's some talk that they've already found some stuff on the western coast in that area that can kind of double for Skellig Michael. So that way that they're not going to have to use Skellig Michael per se anymore, that they film some plates and they can kind of compose it between actual sets in England. Are they still filming in England? Did you?
I assume so. I don't know. I mean, I assume that this Dubrovnik stuff is happening concurrent with production elsewhere, right? That they're building these sets in Dubrovnik while they're filming in England, and then once they're done with England, they'll go to Dubrovnik and then maybe even go back to England. I don't know. I mean, given the way they're doing these movies and the scheduling and given that it seems like they've set up this kind of infrastructure to do it, I just assume like there's going to be some Star Wars movie either building sets or filming or taking down sets in England at any given point in time.
Right.
Someone's probably filming in England right now. But I don't know if that's episode 8 or if it's if they're starting to build sets for something else or what.
Yeah, see, I'd heard some rumors that Colin Trevorrow might not be filming in England, but maybe that's just... Maybe I'm just grabbing... Because I keep thinking about, why aren't they filming in Australia? But then I completely forget that was Fox. The Fox has a huge production facility in Australia, and that's why it was used by the Matrix production, which I don't think was a Fox thing, but that's why there were so many Australian actors in the prequels, is because a lot of that was filmed over there. Actually, no. Phantom Menace was filmed in England. And
yeah, I thought so.
And then
the other two, they went to Australia.
Then they went to Australia. That's it. My cold catching up with my brain. I guess one of the other big reveals is that Harrison Ford will not be appearing in Episode 8,
which isn't. Yeah, I mean, like if you see the movie, then you know. But I guess there were some questions because even after the movie came out, there was some press conference and Kathleen Kennedy said everyone sitting at this table will be back for Episode 8, and Harrison Ford was sitting there. So people were like, "Oh, maybe he's coming back." I always just chalked that up to like, well, of course she has to say that, otherwise she spoils Episode 7.
Exactly. Yeah.
Harrison Ford not being in Episode 8 is like, well, of course not. Everyone has seen Episode 7 at this point, right?
Yeah. Why would you want that? Would you want him to come back as a ghost? Is this what we're doing now?
Right, a Force ghost.
I didn't even know I had the Force.
Or maybe like a flashback, a conversation that he and Leia had, or I don't know.
Yeah, there's some talk. I mean, because one of the points I was going to say about that promotional Episode 8 video is that if Rian Johnson went all the way to there to film. That's not something that they probably just filmed as a like, oh, let's just reshoot something from the movie you just saw. But it's really setting up that this possibility that episode 8 might literally take place like moments after the episode, out of the end of episode 7, which is kind of really a new idea for Star Wars movies. I mean, the books have always done that. I mean, like the Thrawn trilogy, I think, kind of ended. Yeah. I mean, the first book, Heir to the Empire, ended, and then the next one, Dark Force Rising, was almost immediate. But I mean, as far as doing it in almost a comic book style of a cliffhanger with a resolution, it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to immediately go, oh, it has to be, 2 years past, or I mean, they're dealing with this accelerated production style, so they're actually benefiting from the fact that they have actors who are young, and if you go back and look at the original trilogy, Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, it's like they look quite different over the 3 years, and that might just be makeup or whatever, or something that they were actually trying to emphasize that time had passed. I mean, I'd always understood that the difference between A New Hope and Empire was about 3 years, and generally it's about between Empire and Jedi is about a year and a half or a year or something, is what they've always kind of said, like in Star Wars timeline, but they've never pinned that properly.
Right.
But
yeah, and I was thinking about that too when I saw that the video, and I was thinking about like, oh yeah, if they filmed there, then they can't just leave it hanging like that. And that, because then if they jump forward a couple of years, everyone's going to be like, but what happened when she tried to hit him the lightsaber? People are going to want that kind of that resolve. They want to see what happens with that interaction.
Exactly.
But then, thinking about how Star Wars movies have traditionally begun, right, where you have the crawl, and then you're in space, and then it pans down, it pans down to a planet, or it pans down to a ship, or both, I guess. What do they do if that's the opening scene, or is that even going to be the opening scene? It's possible that, it's going to start moments after the events of Episode 7, but it's going to show like, all right, so what are Poe and Finn doing at that point? And then it's going to, cut to Ahch-To. Or is it going to start at Ahch-To? Because I think people are going to want it to start at Ahch-To. With that, the confrontation is not the right word, but that interaction between Rey and Luke. But I don't know how you do that visually if you want to keep it consistent with the other 7 movies, right? Like, I guess you just you start in space, you pan down, so you see the planet of Ahch-To, and then you just zoom way in, almost like what is that, the Hitchcock movie Notorious? Is that the one where the camera is placed at the top of the stairs, and then it zooms in all the way to someone standing at the bottom of the stairs?
Oh yeah,
at the front door. Maybe if you do that and you just take it to the extreme, and you're we're starting in space, and then we're just going to keep zooming in until we get down to where they are. And that could be neat, maybe, but I think it would also look weird. And it would, so then you ask the question, okay, well, visually, are we going to hit a lot of the same beats? And certainly J.J. Abrams was the kind of person who would want to hit some of those same beats. It's all right, no, this is how a Star Wars movie opens, so we're going to open it that way. And I mean, as much as Rian Johnson loves Star Wars, who knows how he feels about adhering to those kinds of traditions? Maybe he's the one who breaks them and starts allowing more freedom for future directors.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a totally valid point, because it's kind of like, well, if Kathy Kennedy kind of says, we satisfied, the diehards with The Force Awakens and kind of keeping it, although it wasn't a perfect re-representation of the previous 6, but it's okay, now we have now we have the opportunity to kind of go out and try something new. But then again, the one thing I would say against that is like, well, then what is the theory behind the anthology movies? Is that, some people are debating whether...
I mean, I was thinking that even as I talked about, maybe Rian Johnson's the one who breaks the mold. It's like we have no idea what Rogue One is going to look like.
Right. I mean, they
at
don't
least
even
the opening of Rogue One.
They don't even know if there's going to be an opening crawl at the beginning of Rogue One. There's some question as to how thematically, does all Star Wars movies start the same? Do they all have to have? Are they all on this kind of cyclical idea? I mean, it could be I honestly feel like they're probably going to stick to a kind of. They probably might mess with the timeline a little bit, but time has always been slightly flexible in Star Wars. I mean, time is really only ever referred to once. And it's literally when Anakin is in that elevator in Attack of the Clones. Yeah. And he says it's been 10 years.
I mean, are we ever going to see a non-linear Star Wars movie, right? Where you see different storylines involving different characters happening at different points in time, like that? At this point, I mean, we're in kind of who knows territory. I think.
Yeah, like imagine if they did like what if they're like gearing up for a Godfather 2 situation where you are simultaneously like pushing the story forward, but they're going through what happened with Luke on his first Jedi, temple or whatever, or what he's been doing for the last, 15 years or whatever. I mean, it boggles the mind. I mean, my gut tells me that they will kind of just keep it. They'll stick to the what's the word? Oh, now I'm completely blanking on it. Oh gosh, they'll just keep doing the way they've normally done it. It's on the tip of my brain and I can't. It's not working. But I think the other kind of there was other surprises. There was a casting surprise.
Laura
Dern.
Huh.
Interesting.
I like Laura Dern a lot.
Me too.
In some stuff. And then other things she does, I'm like, I don't care.
I mean, I'm trying to think about what she's done recently that I was not even really aware of. I mean, honestly, the last thing I ever saw her in was when she worked with Lynch on Inland Empire.
Yep.
And that was like kind of her tour de force.
Mm-hmm.
That she was like,
she was great.
She was swinging for the benches, or I don't know. Why am I using terms that I'm not even sure about today?
Yeah, so she did. I'm on her IMDb page now. Okay. So she did Inland Empire in. God, I don't even remember when that movie came out.
It's got to be 7 years ago or something like that.
So 2006. There we go. Since then, she did a movie called Year of the Dog.
Oh, is that the one with Molly Shannon?
It is. Written and directed by Mike White.
Yeah.
She did a couple of short films. She did a movie called Tenderness, which I am not... It looks like a prison movie with Russell Crowe or something. I don't know. She did the TV show Enlightened, of course, which I've heard terrific things about. I never saw.
Yeah, I keep seeing that on HBO, and I haven't watched it. It was like,
she was in Everything Must Go. She was in the Little Fockers movie. She was in The Master.
Oh yeah, what did she play in The Master?
She plays Helen Sullivan.
I'm trying to remember.
I didn't see it, so I don't know.
Oh,
she did The Fault in Our Stars. She played Franny. She played Nellie Bly on an episode of Drunk History. Something called When the Game Stands Tall. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I know
it looks like it's about some high school football team. She did a movie called Wild, which is Reese Witherspoon.
Oh yeah, she's been
taking a solo hike.
She's been doing a lot. Then
she is in something called 99 Homes. About the housing crisis, I guess it was
it's kind of so she's been pretty
I guess
active.
She's doing that Netflix animated show F is for Family, apparently.
Oh, that's what's his face, the guy. What's that guy? Bill Burr podcast guy.
Yeah, which there is a Star Wars connection because Mike Price, who I think wrote or was the head writer or something for the Lego Star Wars original trilogy like miniseries. He's, I think, the head writer on F is for Family. So yeah, she's still working, but it's like nothing that
her profile, his kind of
her
work is still there.
I need to watch Enlightened, but other than that, it's like nothing I would have seen. Really.
Well, I mean, either way. I mean, I kind of like this. That's one of the things about the prequels that didn't necessarily pay off in the way I hoped it was, but I still would like it when I was hearing like, we've cast Christopher Lee, and it's like, oh, this will be interesting. And the fact that they cast Max von Sydow obviously in The Force Awakens, and this kind of, and I hesitate to call that stunt casting. I mean, it'll be interesting how big her role is. There is a what's the young woman's name, Tron, that was cast in. She was like the other big.
Yeah.
But mostly it's like she's definitely been on television, and but she's done a lot of like YouTube videos and stuff. Some people have speculated that maybe that she's doing something comedically, that or a CGI character. I didn't even bother to go and check. I'm going slow because I know we have 2 years, so I'm not like rushing to be like. I gotta watch everything she's ever done.
But I'm definitely approaching this one differently than I did episode 7 in terms of like what I want to know and when I want to know it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then of course Benicio del Toro, but everybody knows that he was coming, and I'm definitely excited about him because he's one of those guys that you don't necessarily go think to your mind, oh yeah, he's like one of the greats, but then like every time you see him, you're like, oh wow, he's one of the greats. Yeah, even when he's got very little to do,
anytime he has a movie come out, it's like, oh, a terrific performance from Benicio del Toro, and you're like, oh right, he is good.
You can honestly, I guess you can kind of say that about Laura Dern. She's, when I think of her, mostly I think of when I was, in college, and her two big, Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart, or in Jurassic Park, which that's right. So we know that she can do small and she can do big, and it's that Dern family. They all have a lot. There's a lot of talent between them. I have no reservations about her. I mean, some people have already kind of speculated that she might be the character. There's a character that has a similar look to her in the Princess Leia comic. I don't know.
Her pilot friend.
Yeah, but I don't know if that
Yvonne.
I don't even know if the timeline kind of matches up.
Yeah, I don't know if that would match up. I'm not sure.
I mean, I don't know. It's only like, I mean, we don't even really know how old Princess Leia is supposed to be. Again, it's one of these things, fast and loose. So it's totally possible. I mean, Laura Dern is in her late 40s or whatever, and she could they could 15 years here and there, and they don't really establish in the comic book the age of that character. The only thing I would say is that I have this whole idea that people are like, oh, they're going to introduce him in the comic and then they're going to introduce him in the movie is not, so far hasn't really come to pass. That I don't believe. Yeah, and I've heard other Star Wars podcasters concede this too, that they don't necessarily think that Rian Johnson and Kathy Kennedy are sitting down and going like, we need this to dovetail into the comic book better.
Yeah, because, no, I mean, and that's an issue that I think. I mean, I do wonder. We keep talking about the canon stuff, and if eventually it's going to get tangled up. Like I'm pretty sure that the directors that they're getting are not that aware of like what's happening in the comic books. And so there might come points in the future where they want to do something that might contradict something that was in the comics, or that like the Lucasfilm Story Group will have to go to them to like, well, actually this comic book came out like 3 years ago that's canon, and that, says this person is actually the one who did the thing. And so, the person directing the movie or writing the movie might go like, oh, yeah, fine, whatever. They're not going to care. Like, sure, you want it to be that person, we can make it that person. But, that'll be like almost accidental.
Right.
They're not going to like make it a point to make all of these things connect. If that's going to happen with anything, it's going to be with Rebels, I think.
Yeah, it's the idea that, nobody's going to sit there and look at a director of a of a $200 million film that has a release date and say that you need to be more respectful of a comic that maybe 40,000 people read, maybe, and maybe about maybe 20,000 of them paid for it. Yeah. So
right. I mean, these people directing these movies, right? They're understanding of like, say, Princess Leia's backstory. It's going to be the original trilogy movies,
right?
And yeah, they might get like, oh, by the way, here's like a binder of, what the canon today says her backstory involves and like the adventures she had, but like they're not going to look at it, and if they are, they'll have an assistant look at it and say like, all right, just let me know if there's anything I need to know, and they'll be like, no, not really. So they're just going to keep bringing in whatever. And working with Carrie Fisher, because I can't imagine Carrie Fisher is going to care like what the Princess Leia comics were.
Exactly.
I mean, she'll be like, "Oh, I'm glad they gave her own comic," and that's going to be the extent.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. How come I didn't get to write it?
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
and what and what money am I making off of this?
Exactly.
Like it's so they're just going to be working with Carrie Fisher to like develop that character and what she's been doing over the last 20 years, and that's going to have zero to do with whatever the comics say.
Speaking of, since we brought up Carrie Fisher, it kind of makes, I had this thought again, like I said, I have these dumb late night Star Wars thoughts, and this is where I dump them. But to frame it a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Star Wars thoughts.
Late night. Well, I try to, what I do? It's my part of my show prep. I get very intense, like reading a lot of stuff, get my mind in the mindset so we can talk about it. But
yeah.
I was thinking about, and I had this, and I'll get to, let's get to the meat of the matter, and I'll tell you why I came up with this. It's like, what do you think?
The meat of the matter on Late Night Star Wars.
Are we gonna have, is Leia gonna have anything to do in these movies?
Oh, I know. And I think I think we even talked about this.
Is she going to get effed again? Because I just had this, like, my late night thought was, like, how much better would Attack of the Clones have been, and, like, Revenge of the Sith had been, if Padme
actually did stuff?
Had been, instead of being, like, running away from these assassins that never actually show up after the first 15 minutes of the movie, she actually ends up walking right into the assassins at the end.
Right.
Right. What if we can't go back and do this, but this is just, whatever, Monday morning quarterbacking. What if the B story of, well, actually the A story, really, the A story of Attack of the Clones was that Amidala was a political rival of Palpatine's. And he, that was the underlying thing, is that there's like, it becomes like, even in that second movie, she's already kind of having philosophical differences with him, and they're arguing, and he's kind of like, I got to get rid of this lady, and then that kind of creates this weird, because people always talk about this love triangle between Anakin and Obi-Wan and Padme that was rumored about, post Phantom Menace. Like, I'd read some speculation. Oh, that's gonna be the thing it's gonna turn Anakin to the dark side, is that his jealousy towards Padme. And what if it had been like a thing where it had been more of, his mentor and his lover, and it was like he was torn apart, whether she's seeing that democracy is slipping away, and God, how much better could that be? My point is that we can't do that. Can't go back and change those movies. But what if there was some political, intrigue about this idea that, Leia went from being what we assumed she was going to, in the books and stuff, she was running everything in the books, to when they reboot everything, she's literally like the equivalent of the Alex Jones of the galaxy, until she's proven right. She's kind of marginalized. She's on some secret planet with like leftover X-Wings, and she's like, no, I'm telling you that the First Order is going to do something. You can't trust them. And she becomes marginalized. I mean, I know there was conversations between Leia and I think her name is Agia Freeman, who is the actress who played I think she either played the Chancellor of the Galaxy or she was one of the High Mucky Mucks, and she's the woman you'll actually see. She looks up in the sky right before the blast from Starkiller Base hits that planet. Unfortunately, her lines were cut. But it did show you that there was some scenes that kind of discussed the political workings. I mean, I think it would be an interesting way of them to kind of reintroduce the concept of politics but maybe make it more interesting rather than people standing and arguing at senates, and because basically the galaxy doesn't have a quote ruling class anymore. Mm-hmm. And so she does kind of end up becoming, is she going to end up becoming the de facto leader of this, or is she just going to be somebody on the run? Is she going to, will there be will we see some growth?
And I mean, I feel like we addressed this a little bit with episode 7. I can't remember if it must have been before we saw the movie. Or at least I thought about it, which is, Carrie Fisher physically, I don't know if she's really up for a lot of like running and jumping around. And even like, not that she couldn't do it, but I feel like if they asked her, she would just kind of like look at them and be like, really? You want me to do what?
Yeah, exactly.
So because of that, yeah, I'm worried that she'll just end up being like standing there and she'll like offer people hugs, and then she'll be like in the room when they come up with an idea, right? Like,
right.
That's basically what happened in episode 7. She was there in the room. She like trusted the right people, and she relied on her advisors to come up with the answer for defeating Starkiller Base. And she hugged some people. And that was kind of it.
Yeah,
and so I'm like you're saying, like, I really hope that's not all she does from now on. I mean, I have to imagine that she and Luke will meet up again at some point, right? And so that'll be like a scene, and so maybe there's a longer conversation between the two of them. Almost like there was in Jedi when he told her that they were brother and sister or whatever. They had like a meaningful conversation, and so maybe there will be a chance for her to like act a little bit there and reveal more about her character and have more of a presence. I have to think that at some point she and Kylo Ren will meet up, just because of the way,
right,
the way things are, and that's how movies work, right? Like, if you set up these relationships with people, like, eventually they're going to have a conversation about it. And so again, that's another scene where she could, really show her acting and have a presence in these movies. But I don't know what else. I mean, maybe they could show her flying something, because in the comic books, a little bit. I mean, in the Marvel comics, they haven't done this quite as much. At the very end of Dark Horse's run, I've mentioned this a couple times, but they kind of rebooted the Star Wars title. And in that, you got to see Leia doing like a bunch of stuff, including flying X-Wings and things like that. And so, you can stick her in a cockpit and just kind of, roll her on a gimbal a little bit. And she can seem like she has a bigger role and that she has more of an action thing without requiring her to like, swing across a chasm again.
Yeah, I mean,
so hopefully they do something like that, right? Maybe she helps fly the Falcon. Maybe she, I don't know, but she, she's in a command position, certainly. But I hope they just don't turn her into like Mon Mothma,
Yeah, I mean, I think the piloting thing is a good idea. I don't necessarily think you have to show some kind of battle prowess to show that she's strong. I mean, she has the diplomacy angle too. I mean, she's got, if we're just roughing the idea, so she's been a senator since she was a teenager, so she's got 40 years of negotiating. I mean, if you're dealing in a galaxy that doesn't have a central power structure anymore, and they're going to need supplies. They've lost their banks. Basically, there's no fleet, so she's going to have to negotiate with groups of people to get them things. So I mean, I just think that's like there should be a lot for her to do. I really hope that they have decided to do that, unless we are literally looking at a situation where Disney and Lucasfilm is like, well, we're going to slowly roll these characters out, and the ones that are the ones that you can't, that aren't masked characters. I mean, think about it. I mean, if we really think about how little like the original people had to do in this movie, I mean, R2-D2 had a tarp over him the entire movie.
Right. C-3PO had like a handful of lines,
and it wasn't very well liked in that movie. A lot of people are like, he doesn't look right, and I thought that scene was messed up. I've heard people say,
yeah.
So, like,
Mark Hamill removes his hood, turns around, and that's it. Doesn't even have a line of dialogue, and then you have Harrison Ford, who. Yeah, of course, has a much bigger role, but that's because it was his blaze of glory, his last, his last hurrah, and so he probably was more game to like, all right, this is my last hurrah. I'll talk about Rathtars or whatever the hell you want me to do.
So much torch passing. Everybody's getting torches. You get a torch. They get a torch. Yeah. I mean, if that's where they're going,
and by torch you mean a flashlight.
Yeah, if they're basically at the point where they're getting by the 9th movie, it's just going to be, maybe Luke is a ghost and that Finnish dude in the Chewbacca thing, and it's BB-8, and I mean that's definitely something I'm prepared for, that because they call them the legacy characters.
Well, here's the thing. Do you think they will make a Star Wars movie? And I'm assuming he's not in Rogue One, so I'll say, do you think they'll make a Star Wars movie that has an episode number without Anthony Daniels while Anthony Daniels is still alive?
Probably not.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, surely like eventually they will. They're just not going to put him in a movie. Some directors be like, yeah, I don't really think we need C-3PO here, but then. Oh my God! The hell they would unleash.
Yeah, you don't really
Anthony Daniels like, I've devoted my entire life to you, and I've always appeared at whatever piddly little function you wanted me to be in, and this is the thanks I get. And it would be bad for them. I think
it's amazing that like somebody who literally is not essential to the production, has would have such a sway over it. Kind of reminds me of that. Did you ever see that show that what's his name? Oh gosh, I'm terrible with names today. Have you ever seen that show Man to Man with Dean Lerner?
Yes.
The one where it's the guy who's kind of like on a sci-fi show.
Oh yeah.
That's what I've got. You got to look at it. It's like, I forget the name of the character. It's like Glenn Nimron. So if you're on YouTube, you can, or I think it's actually Man to Man is actually on Hulu, but you can look it up. It's Dean Lerner, it's Richard Ayoade, and the guy, and I'm spacing on his name, that played
not Matthew Berry.
Matthew Holness.
Yeah.
It's a talk show,
Dark Place. Right.
Yeah.
So there was the show Dark Place. And then this is like a spin-off from that show Dark Place.
Yeah, and it's an interview show where Dean Lerner, he plays a kind of like a 21st century version of Hugh Hefner, and he has a penthouse and he does interviews.
Not even 21st century, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's old. But his whole like thing is that every week Matthew Holness plays a different character. One day he comes back as Garth Marenghi, but he also plays a thing which is like a combination of
Imran,
who's the combination of every minor sci-fi television functionary that you've ever seen that's tried to overextend his importance to the role. Right. And it's kind of like, when I see Glenn Nimron, I think of guys, I think of George Takei and Walter Koenig, and I think of Anthony Daniels, and somebody that played like the Doctor who did like 2 episodes before they fired him. Yeah. That kind of idea. I mean, I said this kind of as a hot take a few weeks ago that I am not a huge C-3PO fan.
Yeah, no, they used him well in like the first movie. And then I think he was used pretty well in Return of the Jedi, like for what it was by that point. But the rest of it, I think it was like even Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
he works.
It is a little too much.
Oh, really? Because I honestly think he's really good about. He's good. He's good when he's setting the tone of a situation, or they're trying to. The actors are quote trying to emote, but they don't want to make it too dark. So, like, in Empire, when they're closing the gate, and then he makes that really inappropriate comment.
Yeah, that's true.
Or watching him, like, shuffle really quickly as they're trying to escape Echo Base.
Right.
And it's so...
Yeah, I guess in Empire, I'm mostly thinking of when they're on Cloud City. And I think he's more annoying than anything on Cloud City.
Yeah, once they blow him.
But you're right,
pieces,
when they're on Hoth, he's good. He's good at Echo Base.
But if you rewatch the prequels, it's like, it's almost... Well, he has a very, very minor role in Revenge of the Sith. I mean, it's so minor.
Mm-hmm.
That I get so annoyed at watching him he's there to go, that Jaw creature is quite strange, and then it's like, we've been with him for an hour, dude. We know he's an asshole. We're sick of him. Or Anakin has to do 2 more circuits. I mean, I know that Anthony Daniels didn't write the lines, and I know he doesn't get to decide. So I'm not picking on Anthony Daniels any more than the dude needs to be picked on for being kind of a blowhard. But yeah, he's not. That character is like, it was very cute when George would say, "Oh, really, the Star Wars saga is kind of told through the eyes of the droids." And it's like, I mean, Kenny Baker, obviously, he's in his 80s and he's not getting in the suit anymore. And he probably just shows up and they give him lunch and he goes, "Hey, it looks really good. Do good job." It's like they don't need to employ him really. It's, if they need a good luck charm, you could make an argument that Warwick Davis is a better good luck charm than Kenny Baker, because he's been in all those things. I mean, he's played 50 different things in these movies. Every time they need, an actor of a certain size, he's in there. Although I kind of wish he'd get some lines. I like Warwick Davis. He was. Yeah. I love Willow. I mean, that's a fun movie. He is a good actor. He's a good comedic actor. What is this the week where we basically say, hey, quit abusing your Carrie Fishers, quit abusing your Warwick Davis, and quit kissing Anthony Daniels behind. The man has money.
Yeah. And again, not to like belabor this, but I mean, even the thing with the red arm, right, which was like the bulk of him in The Force Awakens. Yeah. It was like they made a thing of it in the movie, but right, so first they told people beforehand, oh, by the way, or they showed it in the preview, like, C-3PO has a red arm now, and don't worry, we'll get a comic book that explains why he has a red arm. And you're like, oh, isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting that he has a red arm? And then, like, in the movie, he was like, why, look, I have a red arm. It's a funny story how I got this red arm. I'm sure you would be interested to hear it, but we don't have time now. It's like it was almost like they only put it in the movie to justify like the hype that it got before they released the movie. Exactly.
And then they replaced the arm at the end. He doesn't have the arm at the end.
I know. And if they hadn't done any of that, like, oh, did you notice C-3PO's new red arm? Isn't that interesting? Like, if they hadn't done any of that build up, his line of dialogue in the movie where he mentions it, it would have like been completely out of nowhere and incongruous and be like, why do we care that he has a red arm? Exactly. Like, it would have made no sense. So they had to like hype it up just to make that line in the movie make. It was such a weird moment.
It's kind of, it reminds me of my late grandfather was a pipe smoker, and he had a pipe that had a bolt and a nut in the bottom of it. Like literally there was a bolt sticking out of the bottom of the pipe and a screw on a nut on the bolt. And we would always go like, Grandpa, how come you have a thing? Well, we thought there was some big story behind it. No, it's like, no, I bought a cheap pipe and I burned a hole through the bottom of it, and I had it around the house. That's the whole story.
Right.
It's a conversation piece. Right. Like, oh, it's not like something you like, oh, this pipe has been in my family for 3 generations. No, It was broken and I fixed it. And that's kind of what, C-3PO's arm is. It's like, if we really want to, you could make a point, the fact that, the Vader Down comic did a better, more interesting job with having both of his arms ripped off and stolen by his evil doppelganger. 000. But whatever.
So as you said, we're calling for more Princess Leia. We're calling for more Warwick Davis. Maybe a little. Maybe pull back on the C-3PO. Even though they pulled back a lot. Maybe pull back a little more on the C-3PO.
Why don't we throw a tarp over him for a movie? How about that? Let's throw a tarp over 3PO for a movie.
Yeah. And then he just shows up at the end and says, "Hello, I'm C-3PO, human cyborg relations," and then R2D2 beeps, and then that's the end of the movie.
Well, and speaking of that, and maybe I'm going off I'm too affected about the world around me, and I don't have a sense of humor about it. How quickly does 3PO go from 0 to slap on R2D2? Yeah. Talk about domestic violence in a relationship.
Yeah. I think at that point he's just like, all right, enough.
I mean, that stuff would work in the 70s, but now he's still slapping that droid. Come on, man.
And you do get the sense that R2D2 being completely shut down for years, maybe even decades. C-3PO probably got along fine. He was
exactly
thank you.
Yeah, he knew BB-8. He's just hanging out with BB-8.
I know. I didn't understand that part either.
All right.
And so we should. There's even before we get to episode 8. There's another movie coming out.
Is there
this year? Did you know that, Robert?
Oh, is that Star Wars Rouge one? Is that the?
Yes,
it's about a bunch of drag queens that steal the Death Star plans.
Right. There's the all powerful Rouge that gives anyone the biggest modeling contract, and so Rogue One: A Star Wars Story will be getting its own Force Friday this September. Consult your local stores.
Oh, so that's another excuse to buy some undersupplied, poorly sculpted toys, right?
Right. And I'm kind of curious to see, okay, so what are the toys going to be for this? Who are they going to... I would hope that Felicity Jones's character gets the most attention, but, we know that there's that crew of rebels that, we saw the cast photo. But since then, I mean, there hasn't been that much news about it. Which is itself also notable. But what news there is, it's mostly been speculation about Felicity Jones's character and Mads Mikkelsen's character.
Right.
Which sort of implies that those two are going to be really driving the movie, but we don't know who the big villain is. Is it going to be Alan Tudyk? Is it
Forrest Whitaker?
So we have no sense of what is going to be driving the marketing for this movie, other than the fact that hey, here's a Star Wars thing, buy some toys. Which is sort of what they do with Rebels. Honestly.
Oh, I know. Trust me.
I could easily see Rogue One being marketed sort of the way they do Rebels, which is it's Star Wars. Here.
If I wanted a house full of Rebels memorabilia, I could do it for a fraction of the cost.
And I'm not even sure you could fill your house.
No, you really
you could probably fill a room.
I did turn down a $4 what is it, Inquisitor alarm clock at Target the other day because I was just I don't think I really want this guy that was in 5 episodes of Rebels. I don't need this alarm clock.
Yeah,
I did.
We'll talk about Rebels again later. But hey, remember when there were other Inquisitors this season?
Yeah, exactly.
For that episode and a half, maybe. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, right. So even then, the Inquisitor is oh wow, it's a very striking character design, but it's not a big part of the show.
I did finally was able to get a 6-inch Black Series Captain Phasma, which was my goal from the first Force Friday that happened back in September. That's all I wanted. Mm-hmm. I wanted a Captain Phasma 6-inch Black Series because I liked that way that character looked. And the movie came out, and no, Captain Phasma, she didn't turn out to be the cool, all the great lines character, but I still stick by the design. I like it. So I finally got that. But the funny thing is it finally came in stock, and then a day later, the short 3-inch one. So now I'm lousy with Captain Phasma dolls in my house.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I have 2 of them. That's not really lousy, but I'm slowly building up my original Kenner run figures. I went to like as if somehow like a bolt in the blue. I walked in to Half Price Books and I found they were selling loose Star Wars figures, like original Kenner edition. Like so, I was able to pick up my my Rebel Commando with gun and my AST driver with gun, and I bought another Ugnaught because my other Ugnaught I lost his little briefcase. So if I paid $5 for an Ugnaught with a briefcase, I might have a problem.
Yeah,
but that's as much collecting. Yeah. Well, that and if you follow us on Twitter, you'll get to see. I don't know if you saw this, John. The thing I stumbled across in a Goodwill the other day.
Oh yeah.
The Darth Vader.
The porch lights,
it's your porch lamp cover.
Yeah,
it's a life-size Stormtrooper and Darth Vader head you're supposed to hang it over your porch. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I can't imagine how that would work because like you're covering up most of the light. Then,
well, yeah,
I can't imagine, especially the Darth Vader, whatever, it's black. I can't imagine there's enough light coming through his eye.
There's not. There's basically they glued some kind of weird mesh onto the eyes, and it casts this very disturbing pallor when you. I didn't do it on my front porch. I don't need the neighbors.
So you actually did purchase them?
Yes, they were $3 a piece.
Oh, okay. Well,
and I thought at the very least I could give them to my nieces, but they. I bought the Stormtrooper one. I held over a light bulb, and it actually lit up. I mean, but they actually, if you can hang them on a hook or something, and they look pretty cool. But they're kind of a ridiculous thing. I mean, they're by the nomenclature on the packaging or whatever, you can tell it's around Revenge of the Sith era. So they're from 10 years ago or 11 years ago. So they were already starting to run out of ideas.
Right.
So
we'll get another Force Friday, which is fine, I guess. I mean, I do wonder if we'll get not just toys, but like sort of. I still wonder if we'll get like a journey to Rogue One or even journey to Episode 8. You know, the same way that they did with Force Awakens. If that push was like successful enough, but I think the only 2 books I think they have scheduled to come out right now are Bloodlines, which is Claudia Gray's book about Leia, essentially. And then Aftermath 2, which I think is called Life Debt. But I think both of those are coming out in like April and May, so they're not even going to be part of that really big push to like, hey, there's a new Star Wars coming out. Let's all think about Star Wars, everyone.
It's interesting.
I'll be interested to see whether this one, because it's one of these anthology ones, I'll be interested to see whether the marketing push is more muted, or if they like go full out like this is a Star Wars movie, get excited.
Well, it also makes me wonder if the big brouhaha that happened in the last few weeks here is in movies is that when the Deadpool movie came out, which was a huge success, when even Fox, I think Fox, is it Fox? Yeah, Fox was not. I think they took money out of the budget. They made Ryan Reynolds actually take a pretty substantial pay cut to be in this movie. So I think they were basically, they literally actually had them remove characters from the film for fear that they might tarnish the characters if they used them, so they wouldn't be able to use them in subsequent other mutant films. And then it turned out to be this unmitigated success. And now there's all this talk, which partly spearheaded by Guardians of the Galaxy's James Gunn, that his fear is that now all these companies are going to now think, oh, we should make an R-rated action comedy.
Right.
And it almost makes me, at the same time that Lucasfilm Disney is pushing forward here, their marketing, and there's already been rumors that there was issues with this film, that Christopher McQuarrie had to come in and rewrite some of the movie, or some of it's had to be reshot. And there's all this talk. We've got these people from, Band of Brothers or whatever coming in to talk about, or what was, no, it wasn't, it was Black Hawk Down or something that they, it's got more of this gritty, lone survivor feel. Is there any, I haven't heard any talk that they might be looking for a hard PG-13 or possibly even an R, which I can't imagine that they would make an R.
I can't imagine an R. It'll probably be a PG-13 though.
But are they going to be are they going to be using this kind of like, people have a bigger threshold for this kind of, for explicit violence than we thought, even though I would honestly say, having seen Deadpool, it's not as crazy violent as people think it is. It's mostly the humor, and it's there's a lot of sex in it.
Yeah, someone apparently recently posted a rumor or like, hey, I've seen the Rogue One trailer and it's pretty dark, but like that's all they said. I was like, oh, it's dark. So I don't know. That could mean anything, in the context of Star Wars. I mean, not anything, but
yeah, I mean, people
that. Someone saying like, "Oh, it's going to be dark," that doesn't really mean anything to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some rumors that Vader has a part in this, and he's, there's been all this. I don't even know who's playing him because there's been all this rumor throwing around that this MMA guy, Scottish guy by the name of Seamus something, is playing Vader. And that he actually filmed some stuff for the Force Awakens flashback sequence that ultimately wasn't used, and that's James Earl Jones will be supplying the voice for Rogue One, and the Seamus guy might be playing Vader. I don't know where I even read that at, but the characterization that people said is like he's really brutal in it. And it kind of makes me think like, okay, well, it'll be interesting because I honestly, like I said, my last watching of A New Hope, I honestly kind of got a dilettante vibe off of Vader in A New Hope. But, if they're going to try to shoehorn him in like, oh no, he's really angry and violent and he, throws people up. I mean, he was pretty choky at the beginning of A New Hope. He was choking people left and right, but I really want a teaser. I really want to give me where's my minute and a half teaser? I mean, we're literally 8 months away. Did we have a teaser? When did we have the first Star Wars teaser?
That's an excellent question. I don't remember.
It was Christmas. It was Christmas of 2014.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of like that was the big thing, and people were like, I don't know. Maybe they're not comfortable. Maybe they don't want to. They don't want to do this until The Force Awakens is out of theaters. And I mean, I don't know what kind of marketing classes they teach people, about how do you build interest without, cannibalizing a property you already have.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they're still trying to sell those toys. They've just gotten to the point where they brought out the second wave of Force Awakens toys, and people are starting to buy those. And I don't know. I don't think they want to pilfer that Star Wars Headspace album that Rick Rubin put out.
Yeah, I don't know.
You want to talk some? Rebels?
Yeah. Let's talk some Rebels. So it's been a while since we caught up with Rebels. I think the last episode we talked about was.
Didn't we talk about Conquer Dawn a little bit?
I think we did, but we talked it because we record on Wednesdays, which is then Rebels comes out that evening. So I think we talked about it because I had seen the preview and the fact that the guy talked like Dudley Do-Right, but I don't think we had actually seen the episode. I think the episode aired that day. So we can talk about that, the full episode if you want, but then there's, since then, we've had Legends of Lasat, The Call, and Homecoming.
And there actually another one came out today, I think, or last night.
Yeah, one's airing tonight,
which I've actually seen already.
Oh, you have? I have not.
Yeah, I was watching Homecoming, or no, I'm sorry, I watched this week's episode on the Disney XD app.
Yeah,
and then I realized, I haven't seen the Homecoming yet, which was the
they're not related,
right? Yeah, they're not.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, none of these episodes are connected to each other in any way. That I guess we'll just start there. Like even something like Legends of Lasat, which involves finding these other Lasat that,
Right.
Zeb had said, like, he was the last of his kind or something, or it was implied that he was, his people had been massacred, and that he, the Lasat believe in this mystical force, or this mystical something or other that's basically the Force, and that you can use the Force in different ways to, they use it to find their next home, this mythical planet, homeworld. Then in the next episode, like, it was never mentioned. It had no bearing on anything that happened. It was just like, no, I guess that was last week. This week we're doing something else. And yeah, this was supposed to be some like big earth-shaking revelation, and Zeb was supposed to be changed, and his view of the world was changed by having this happen. We're like, no, they're just no. There's just another mission, and they're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's indicative of some of the problems I have with it, is it being a grown up and trying to enjoy it. The lack of, sorry about that, I kicked my mic.
No.
Just the kind of the growth. I mean, I know it's a kids show, but they do kind of try to sell you, if you want the whole Star Wars experience, you should be checking out this show. And I mean, I know that Dave Filoni is the closest link that the franchise still has to George Lucas. I mean, he was story-wise, he was personally trained by him. But I also get the feeling that there's, budgetary and like, don't muddy up the water too much kind of edicts coming from on high, because it's just a lot of like, don't make stuff that the kids have to watch stuff in a certain order, because we've done it. We've run tests and we find out that, kids between the ages of 6 and 12 don't like episodic. I mean, don't like having to have
season-long arcs or whatever.
Exactly. Which is, was very indicative of the Clone Wars, to the point where it's actually confusing, because a lot of people complained that things were shown out of order, and that
and even in the Clone Wars itself, like, they would have these 2 to 4 episode long arcs, but like within the timeline of the show, those events weren't shown, quote unquote, shown like in order necessarily, or at least not in the first couple seasons. I think after a while they're like, all right, yeah, no one's getting that. But yeah, they've had a couple of multi-episode arcs, or not even arcs, but like in Rebels, they've had, okay, the events of one episode then are brought up again in the following episode, at the very beginning of the season, the first half of the season, with finding the old clone troopers. That was certainly the case. But here it's just like, right, so in the Protector of Concord Dawn, okay, the Protector of Concord Dawn is now part of the rebellion, I guess, or at least they still have him in custody or something.
Yeah.
You haven't seen him. What is he doing? Is he doing anything? Is he in prison? Is he helping them? What's happening there? Like, no, we're just not going to mention it anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's hard to me if you're a kind of a casual Star Wars fan to, like, if you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe you guys talk about this show, maybe I should check it out. I'm honestly having a trouble like recommending it, like, for people that have to go out of their way to see it.
Yeah,
it's like, it doesn't feel essential. I mean, it looks great if you're a person who likes the visual style. It's not like the voice acting is bad or anything. Although I will say this, since it just come up, so we're jumping around here, and since they jump around,
I will say,
if they're jumping
some
around,
of this, I think. Sorry, I think you're right. Some of this is us viewing it as adults.
Yeah.
Where, a lot of the other shows that we watch now are committed to this like season long arc, and one episode flows into the next and everything like that. And that's just not necessarily how shows for children work. And so, we may be viewing it through that lens.
Exactly. I totally concede that point. I will say this, since it came up in my mind, I don't want to forget it. So in Homecoming, which is kind of it's Cam Syndulla, which is Hera's father, and he appeared in an earlier Clone Wars episode that I don't know, and somebody on another podcast that does a recap of these shows kind of laughed, because I guess in the wording that people said that this Cham Syndulla guy or whatever is a fan favorite. And he says, I spend most of my week talking about Star Wars, and I don't ever remember thinking about this guy for 5 seconds.
He also played a big role in Lords of the Sith, the novel that came out last year.
That's when I kept saying something about the free Ryloth, and I'm like, where have I heard that before? And then I'm like, I remember I read that book. So he's kind of it's a story about father and a daughter, and basically them having kind of the same goals but different ways of achieving those goals. And one thing I will say, these are the Twi'lek characters, and that's their planet Ryloth or whatever. They're the ones with the long leku, as they say, or tentacles on their back of their head. So he speaks with the Chamson Dula. He speaks in this kind of faux French accent. Mm-hmm. Did you notice that Hera all of a sudden started talking in that accent?
Yeah,
when they were talking?
I actually appreciate that. And I saw some people on Twitter talking about it before I saw the episode.
That felt weird.
But it's sort of like, when you go home or when you talk to people from home, you kind of hear that. Because I know even my mom, who...
I was going to say, I just realized.
She grew up in New Jersey... and hasn't lived in New Jersey for decades, 40 years, more than 40 years at this point. But when she is on the phone talking to her family, like that New Jersey accent starts coming out. And so I think it was just sort of that idea that even though, Hera and Cam haven't spoken in years, and Hera is obviously off flying around the galaxy doing all this other stuff, and her accent she's kind of lost that accent. It'll come back a little bit, and I appreciated that little touch. It was like, if you're not expecting it, though, you're like, wait a minute, why does her voice sound like that now? But since I had seen other people talking about it, I was sort of listening for it in that way.
Actually, that's actually very illuminating for me, because being a guy who never moved more than 100 miles from where he grew up, I never had an opportunity for my accent to drift. I always have that Pacific Northwest flat accent, and so I guess I never even thought about it. So I guess if you kind of I've noticed sometimes, even you grew up in Virginia, right? That you sometimes, like, a y'all will pop in.
Yeah, I say y'all.
But do you normally always do that? Is that just a part?
Yeah,
okay.
I can't remember. I don't think I always did, even when I grew up there. When I lived in Virginia, I can't remember at what point it entered my vocabulary.
And I guess my point is, literally, I guess I never even thought about the idea that, if you're with somebody you grew up with, you tend to fall back into those speech patterns. And so that's actually, I would say that's a boon to them on this episode, rather than a negative that I started thinking it was. I thought it was just they were being inconsistent.
I will say I really, really, really liked the call, which is funny because of the episodes we've been talking about, right? That is the one that's the most like a one-off. This episode is not really, there's a little bit about like Ezra's development as a Jedi, I guess, but that one is not really connected to anything else for the most part. But I really liked it, and it's weird because that's the space whale episode,
right? I was like, I had to actually go do a quick check because I was like,
the Purrgil episode, and so when I heard that, or when I saw it before I saw the episode, I was like, ugh, space whales,
there be
really?
Whales here, Captain.
I thought of the Star Trek motion picture. I can't remember which one it was.
Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
4? Yeah, 4. Right, I thought of that, and I was just like, space whales. Like, I just got tired. But watching the episode, I thought it was actually really well done.
Yeah.
And I thought the pacing and the writing and the animation of that episode is probably the best of this most recent run. The other episodes, like with Homecoming, there was something about like the pacing of some of the dialogue that was a little off to me. Like, it just felt slow in some parts, and some of the animation was a little weird, and the same went for Legends of Lasat. Like, they're going to this star cluster, but it's just a background, so it just it just felt completely flat to me. Like it didn't feel like they were flying into a 3-dimensional space. Stuff like that. But with the call, like I thought, like, yeah, like maybe it's not the story I would have liked to see, but like I just thought it was executed really, really well. And I also, I think they, the Purgill idea was probably influenced most heavily by the Ralph McQuarrie concept art for Cloud City.
Oh yeah,
where they had, and they've already sort of taken from that idea before in season 1. I can't remember what they're called, but it's the episode where they're breaking into the prison, and Hera, the Phantom, is like magnetically locked onto this building, and it's sending out a signal, and these flying creatures like try to have sex with it because they think it's like a mating call. Right. So, and those creatures, I think, were probably closer to Ralph McQuarrie's concept art for those creatures, but just the idea of like, all right, they're these kind of aquatic-y animals that can fly through space, was probably taken from there. But then also the Lando Calrissian trilogy that came out in the 80s. There is Lando Calrissian and the Star Cave of Thon Boca. There's a species or a race of creatures called the Oswaft. So the space whales, the Purgill and Rebels it's more like the body of a whale, but then with tentacles at the end, like a squid, whereas the Oswaft, I think, were more sort of like manta ray or jellyfish, maybe. They might have even been more like jellyfish. But I just, it reminded me of that book. And of course, I love those books because it's Lando. So I was like, oh, nice. They're kind of taking those ideas. So, they're not completely closing off, that kind of imagination and those kinds of like, weird like 70s and 80s science fiction ideas. They're still keeping those kinds of things around. So yeah, that was another thing I appreciated about the call. But like I said, I think it mostly of these last 4 or 5 episodes, I think it was the one that was just executed the best.
I would agree.
In terms of the writing and the animation and the voice work.
And also speaking of little creatures that show up that have kind of precedence, I was thinking going all the way back to the mid-season when they went back to Lothal and Ezra finds out the true fate of his parents. Mm-hmm. There's a small kind of almost like kind of a globular rodent character running around. Mm-hmm. That reminded me that in the Star Wars comics, there used to be these things that in the post Return of the Jedi Marvel comics, they went on some planet with these creatures called the Hoojibs, which were like these weird, like telepathic creatures, which I thought was kind of a they don't look exactly the same, but I think it's almost like slightly influenced. I mean, they even made one of those, books with a cassette tape things of like the Planet of the Hoojibs, and you could go and like listen to the whole story. And so, yeah, I honestly think that that's kind of something that McQuarrie had kind of come up with, and they had dipped into that because he, his early, Empire drawings, he had like little weird, like there's a shot of a guy trying to shoot like some kind of ice rat or something in a I like that when they add these little things. It's a way for them to kind of they pull Star Wars a little out of the kind of idea that it's science fiction. I mean, it's never really met the true criteria of science fiction. I mean, there's sound in space, and is this the episode where where Ezra's actually on top of the ship in just his wearing
so at the end, Ezra and Kanan, they're wearing helmets, but they're standing outside of the ship, and so on Rebels Recon, Pablo Hidalgo answers viewer mail at the end of every episode, and so someone asked him this, like, wait, aren't they in space? How can they just survive outside of a spaceship in space? And his answer is like, well, we never actually see that they're in space. And he went back to, the line about from Force Awakens about how stormtrooper helmets filter out smoke but not toxins. He was like, so we know that there is some kind of air filter in these helmets. But then, we see them standing on the ship, and we see stars behind them, but they could still be like in the atmosphere.
Right.
And he's like, there's probably a trace atmosphere around this asteroid, just like there is on the asteroid where the Millennium Falcon lands in Empire Strikes Back. So he was like, well, that doesn't mean they're in outer space. So
I think that's a nice way of saying just shut up and watch the show kind of attitude. But it's like,
Right.
I mean, that's it does take it more into that realm of the fantastical. It's, I mean, I think there's only one, if I'm thinking, and I'm just doing a quick thought, there's only really one time when they even indicate that there's such a vacuum is even an issue in space for them is during the battle of Coruscant in Revenge of the Sith. There's when, what's his name? Grievous breaks the window and everybody starts getting sucked out. And that's the only time they ever really show it. And even he kind of, because he's part robot, he doesn't actually even have to worry about it. He just crawls on the outside of the ship and goes back in through the back door. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not really a stickler for that kind of stuff. I think it's actually kind of makes it more fun. If they kind of because there is a kind of thing like, well, shouldn't they be running out of air? And well, they're not. And then somebody can come up with a funny explanation for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing I want to say about Rebels is I think Vanessa Marshall, who does the voice of Hera, she does a fantastic job. And it's unfortunate that a lot of episodes she just has like a couple of lines because she's really, really good. And she was really good in Homecoming. But I also thought Freddie Prinze Jr. did a really good job in the Homecoming episode. In that scene where he sort of finds out that he's about to meet Hera's father and he's all nervous. And you could kind of like hear it in his voice a little bit. And so, his work, I always think like, yeah, he's fine. Like Kanan's just kind of there. Vocally, in terms of his presence, it doesn't always feel like the vocal performance changes from like scene to scene a lot, but at least in this one, I thought Freddie Prinze Jr. did a really good job.
Yeah, and I think that was a good choice because, I mean, obviously spoilers abound. The plot of the thing is that Cham Syndulla is there to assist the rebels on some kind of TIE fighter bomber hangar or something, and
they're stealing. So there's like a carrier.
Which has never been shown before, as
something
far as I understand.
Above Ryloth. The Free Ryloth movement wants help getting rid of it. So the nascent Rebel Alliance is going to steal it for themselves. They're like, hey, great, we can steal it and get a free carrier. But Cam wants to blow it up as a symbol so that everyone on Ryloth can see, like, look, we blew up your carrier. So that's where the tension comes. So,
and he doesn't.
So that's what the mission is.
And he doesn't tell them really until. What does he tell them? He wants to do that initially, and then.
Then Kanan is like, well, we'll do it Hera's way, and so Cam's like, yeah, okay, but then they
kind of betray. They all get stunned, and then they basically come back, and I mean, it's an interesting kind of thing, and they don't spend a lot of time kind of pointing out, like, you did shoot us and leave us helpless on a ship full of Imperials, but whatever. It's kind of the idea. It's not terribly different than Sabine's episode with the bounty hunter, where they kind of like there's some kind of issue. Although I think they explained it a lot better. In this one, to kind of explain what the historical issue is between Hera and her father. It's just that kind of, he wanted her to stay on Ryloth and free her planet, and she wants to free the whole galaxy. It's just it's a matter of scale, I guess, is what the conflict is. But yeah, no, I honestly like that episode too. Like I said, Legends of Lasat, I thought was an improvement a bit. Concord Dawn, like I said, I can't remember. I had notes and I can't find them. I had some issues with just.
I mean, that was a Sabine episode.
Yeah.
Right, so they're all getting individual episodes, right? So there was a Sabine episode, then a Zeb episode, then kind of an Ezra-focused episode, then a Hera episode, and now there's another Zeb episode tonight. But again, like, so they're all getting individual episodes, but like there's feels like there's less cohesion.
Oh, I did find my notes, and let me see if maybe I got this wrong. This is from like 2 weeks ago, so pardon me. Did they mention something about the Force Ashla in the Legends of Lasat?
Maybe.
Yeah, I thought I made a note here, and I swear they did. It's just something that's just interesting. It's kind of a throwback to the old Lucas, because that's in the early script versions, the Force was referred to as the Force Ashla. I swear that Ashla gets mentioned again. And then there was another thing about they had to go to they had to go through some kind of maze, they said, to get to this planet.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that, like, is that the maze? Is that some kind? I wonder if that is some kind of cosmological thing in the Star Wars universe. Are they actually, referring to like the Rishi maze, which was in Attack of the Clones, that the Jexter diner guy refers to Camino.
Oh, right.
Camino being just not far from the Rishi maze or past the Rishi maze.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought of it more as maybe a reference to the Maw.
Oh yeah,
from those Jedi Academy novels, but either is possible, right?
Yeah,
or at least the idea that, like, yeah, we've had multiple instances of these maze ideas, so sure, we can put another one in there.
Yeah, I think it's just their way of kind of dipping in. I don't know if I had another note that I made about it. I can't remember. See, I ended up watching that other episode and then realizing that we probably didn't. No, I didn't actually. This didn't show up. I know. I just had a note as far as Rebels. I picked up, and it's on the newsstand right now, a American Cinematographer magazine is did a special Force Awakens issue. Issue, and it was like, normally I wouldn't be buying cinematography magazines because I don't know anything about it. But it's always fun when a new Star Wars movie comes out, when the movie industry mags always tend to want to do an interview with either, like, the sound mixer. There's a makeup one, this thing that I didn't pick up just because there wasn't actually enough content to interest me. But this whole issue basically is about The Force Awakens, and they had a really interesting sub-article about Rebels, which wouldn't be something that you would necessarily think about.
Yeah.
When cinematography, but I guess what happens when they have to plan these out in a very cinematic way. They have to set up the shots. They have to render these things in 3D. So they actually have to position, I'm putting up quotes so you can't hear that, but they have to position a camera, and they use these virtual, they use simulated lenses and camera movements based off of literally, they went back to the original shot lists of Gil Taylor, who did cinematography for A New Hope, and they use that as the basis.
Interesting.
And the funny thing is that, and I didn't get through every article because there's like 4 or 5 articles, big articles in here. That is not terribly different than how they did The Force Awakens. I mean, they used practical film cameras to film that, but they still went back to shot lists.
But in terms of the camera moves,
yeah, they went back and they actually, because all this stuff was recorded, some of it was even in American Cinematographer magazine, other issues from in the past, that they actually would use that as a basis for when they set up their shots. Because I guess Rebels uses a program, and I could be wrong. I'm sure they use dozens of programs, but one of the programs is something called Maya. And that's kind of how they use this Maya thing to kind of create virtual lighting, virtual apertures for their thing. And they actually, there's some great examples about how they, even if I'm not enjoying an episode story wise, the visuals on Rebels is, it gave me a whole new appreciation of them, about the idea of how they light a frame to, draw attention. Like if one of the things was an image of Kanan and Ezra in the far away, of a long hallway, and they talk about how they light it, and or how they would actually they use like white dots of light in the eyes of the characters that they want to emphasize. It's quite fascinating that there's as much, if not more, attention paid to camera movement and lighting in these things. And since it's animated, they can, basically do everything. But the one thing they said is that Clone Wars was shot in I'm not an expert on aspect ratios, and they love talking about that in these magazines. But I guess Clone Wars and actually Force Awakens and were shot in 2 to 39:1 ratio, and Rebels is actually shot in 1:78:1 ratio because they literally do it so it takes less time to render. Which I guess the second ratio I've given to you is your standard 16:9 broadcast ratio. And the other one was shot kind of in a simulated scope, not terribly different than the original Star Wars movies, in order to kind of keep a consistency. But they kind of dumped that for Rebels just because they said it was actually, they have to take it and then they send it over to South Korea, and it's actually animated there. Yeah, but it's kind of if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's definitely worth picking up. That does sound interesting. This issue, there's a lot of interesting. The actual they do a set visit for the Force Awakens, but it wasn't terribly revelatory for me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I know they had practical cameras, and then they talk about gels and things like that, and my eyes start to glaze over, and I'm like, okay, yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Okay, especially for the Rebel stuff, because I honestly, I'll track that down. It makes you realize, at least me personally, that I kind of undervalue how much effort and how much they're really trying to evoke another time. I mean, having read that and then watching, there's some great stuff, and I don't know, I forget what the name of this week's episode is, but I won't get into spoiling it. I will say that it is a Zeb centric and Agent Callus centric episode.
It's about sort of Zeb and Callus, because they've released a preview or like a clip from him, and it's Zeb and Callus trapped on one of the moons of Geonosis, and it's freezing cold and night setting in, and so it's clear they're going to have to figure out a way to stay warm together and not kill each other and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's. I honestly think it was a pretty good episode, so I should check it out, and
look forward to seeing it tonight.
Cool. So where are we? Are we about ready to wrap up, or do we?
Yeah, let's wrap up.
Okay. So, as far as wrap ups, if you want to interact with us on the internets, we are. You can always email us at talkingbirdcast@gmail.com. We are on Twitter at Twitter talkingbirdcast. We are on Instagram, although I've been kind of lax about it because I just figured out how to get separate accounts on it so I can stuff, and I've been sick and I haven't really been taking pictures of anything, but which Talking Birdcast on Instagram. We also still had didn't really get much of a response. We did get one review on iTunes, and I want to thank that person. I think I know who it is. I think it's a friend that does
friend of the show.
It does entitle him to a digital copy of a Star Wars comic if you want it. Nobody's come to claim that, so we still have them. I will extend it another week. It's like I said, I have an issue of the Star Wars. What is it? I have Star Wars Annual 1, Star Wars Issue 15, and Obi-Wan and Anakin number 1 in digital copies. If you're interested, give me your info, and I will send you one of them. I haven't had any takers yet. Maybe I'm just naive. Maybe everybody has a good source for comics, and they don't need my hand-me-down digital copies. Yep. But that's cool. I respect that. We're a society doesn't need the physical copy. Well, I'm not sending the physical copy. Digital copy. Mm-hmm. Still sick. Sorry. Anyway.
That's not.
So what else? Did you have anything you wanted to say in closing, John?
Thank you for listening.
Okay, I guess that's it.
And enjoy your Star Wars for the week.
Exactly. Go out and do something Star Warsy this week.
Yeah.
For Talking Birdcast, I have been Robert Zachary.
I'm still John Llewellyn.
Thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.